Alright, and we are now live once again. Hello everyone, and welcome to today's live stream, where I am going to be doing particle trails once again. I just posted this to Twitter, Instagram, all the social medias, and I feel like it's in an okay state. Okay on the verge of being good. So, a little bit of backstory on this. Before simulation nodes became a thing, there was the geometry nodes buffer hack in order to create simulations. And turns out making trails was very, very easy back then. Let's see. I think the music is a little bit too loud. And oh, I am playing the wrong thing. I am playing the soundtrack from God of War. Whoopsie. I'll go and switch that back to the classic Zelda music real quick. There we go, that should be a little bit more pleasant for all of you. But back then, trails were very fast and very easy to implement, whether they were trails in this way or even mesh trails where you would copy a mesh several times, keep its data as the character was moving. Now, when simulation nodes got released, with the new caching system, it became extremely slow, unusably slow in my case, for all of those. So, since then, a new node came around in 4.0, which is the points to curve node, which means that instead of having to instance part of a trail on each of the meshes, again, instances are very slow in Blender, instead of that, I could just create a curve extremely quickly without any, conversions from instances to curves to meshes and all of that. It's still not as fast as I would like, because it does rely on a curve to mesh conversion, while eventually I would like to use the Blender's inbuilt ribbon system, which always faces the camera, which they use for hair in several scenarios. Unfortunately, that system is only available with the curve empty hair or fur objects, which is very weird. We don't have access to have that kind of object in geometry nodes. It seems to be like a specific identifier that we just don't have access to. And the radius of those curves displaying that is just broken in everything but cycles, and the devs have mentioned that they would like to fix that, but it is not a high priority in the slightest. Speaking of not high priority, the for each loop is on hold until further notice, which is very unfortunate, but it is planned eventually. I just don't foresee us having it for the next half year, maybe more, we'll see. But in good news, in terms of geometry nodes, 2 days ago, there were talks about fixing the material bug. So, it's been almost 9 months. I think it's either been over 9 months or around that, since materials were removed from simulation nodes due to a bug. And it seems like we might finally be getting the fix for that. So, projects that I've worked on over a year ago, I may be able to bring into official Blender now, which is a little unfortunate that's taken this long, but it finally coming around because of the bake node is not the worst. Again, simulation nodes bake stuff, and then we are also getting in 4.1 the bake node, which I think this node is the reason why we're getting that fix, which is, it's unfortunate that it took that long, but anyway. And we might see improvements to other aspects of the baking. So yeah, for this particle system, let me do a little overview. We have 30 people here already. Hello, everyone. So, to explain how this works, I have a ton of particles moving around. And it's like, oh, how do we create a trail for all of these particles? And I'm using my inbuilt particle system, or my custom particle system, which is up on Gumroad, but I am creating new nodes because for trails, they need a little bit more information. One of them is consistent IDs. So, to explain this very quickly, when particles get introduced into a system, when new ones do, their indexes get set to be the last in the list, in the array. But when they get deleted, that list gets shifted up. So some particles now are in the same place as another one was in the list. So what this does is it sets the ID to be the furthest in the list, and that does not go back down because that is stored on the particle. So no matter what the actual index of the particle is, there'll be a special index that we set, which is the ID in this case, that will not go back down. So each one will definitively have a determined ID. I'm splitting the particles where I'm doing the exact same thing in here, but this is not really necessary for to explain what the trails are doing. Now this isn't the best method for making trails because obviously you don't want to make it reliant on other nodes in the system. You want it to just plug it in and it just works, in the famous words of Todd Howard. But it's good to have unique IDs for all of your particles that will not conflict with each other. I just wish that I found a better way of doing it rather than having a custom node for it. But anyway, for making the trails, I basically, it's a bit of a large node setup just because there's so many things to account for after the trails are made. It's like, okay, do you want the curve to be a ribbon facing the camera so that you can optimize it and all that good stuff? But anyway, what I do is I put the particles into, here, let's visualize this. We can see that the particles get put into a simulation system and they get kept for however many frames I wish for. And then if they have consistent IDs, they go through this path where they're then changed to curves. If they do not have consistent IDs, then it's like the old instancing method that I had before, where we basically have two versions of the particle, one that's in its previous position, and then we just create a curve between them. It is faster than instancing, but it's still kind of iffy. So that's what we do for there. We can switch between which method we want. The good thing is if we don't use the IDs, it does not rely on any of the setup that I have before. It's completely independent. But the downside is the curves, these are not connected. As we can see, they're disjointed. And the attributes don't blend completely between them, which is why I changed the trail age and the age for each of them to kind of interpolate it without interpolating everything, because that would be a little bit slow in geometry nodes. We don't have that technology at the moment. Because, again, it doesn't reference the actual particle in its previous state. If anyone knows of a better method, please let me know, because, you know, it would be nice. If you do use the IDs, these are all joined together, all the attributes interpolate perfectly, and using the IDs is faster. It is significantly faster. But anyway, so we do that, and then afterwards, after the curve is done, we can change the resolution, which this is extremely optional. I was just like, it would be good to have that in there. It only works when the ID method is on, because again, you need curves that are actually joined together. If we don't have the use ID on, it just, you know, won't matter whatsoever. So you could up the resolution. And then after that, we set the curve normal. In this case, we want them pointing towards the camera. So I take their velocity, which in this case, it could have just been the tangent. But the velocity, since other parts in here use the velocity as well, I just take the velocity because that's essentially the tangent without any interpolation needed and so on. And then we cross-product that by the orientation to the active camera. Side note, I do wish that the active camera node had the actual camera inputs, but for now, this is good enough for what I need right now. And I believe this is only in 4.1. It might be in 4.0. Like, most of this should be doable in 4.0 besides setting the curve normal. Like, there are workarounds to have your own custom curve normal, but it's way more complicated and annoying. But anyway, the amount of workarounds that we have to do is going down. I just want them to be, like, so low that they're basically zero. Again, like with the curve to mesh UV node, which here, I have to store my own UVs. Like this, and it's annoying. But anyway, for the actual mesh part, I either use just one part. Like, a lot of this is just options. That's what makes it so complicated. I have one curved line, x at 0.5 or negative 0.5. Then we put that in. That's just for the ribbon. But if we switch to the other version, it's just a crisscrossed plane. So if we turn off camera align, we can see that this is now a crisscross version. As we can see there, I store a named attribute on the other part of the crisscross because, or I guess just cross, just so that I can offset the texture on that part if needed, because if you don't, it has a couple, it looks kind of duplicated and it doesn't look that great. Then we resample the curve if we want. That's good if you have a very, very large curve, because as you can see, if it gets to be too big, it looks a little bit odd. And then you can do this to make it look a little bit better. So that's the case with all of that. Just so many options that you need to take into account if you want to make one good generalized node. And then we just set all this for the curve info. I should have really turned off the timing so that you can actually see everything without that much visual noise. It is a clunky setup, but I really don't know at the moment how to make this easier with all the options that I would like. But that is the case right now, and I think it's okay. That's how I would describe it. It's okay. I wish it could be better. But yeah, the only downside is that, again, it needs the IDs that are actually stacked and stay consistent, so that in no case do two particles have the exact same ID. I can show what happens if I don't do this. So if we do that, we can see, boom, we get a very nice, it looks kind of cool, but again, that's not what you want. It freaks out, and also, since the random values use the ID, a lot of these are following the same path. So it's good to have consistent IDs, but it is just a little bit annoying. If we turn off the use ID node, we can see that, oh, the trails look good. So it is an option to have it the simple way. But if we extend the radius, we can see that the parts are not conjoined, which is similar to how it was before, you know, with the buffer hack version that I had in times past. So use ID and make sure that your IDs are stacked so that no two particles have the same one. This is the most robust method that I found before I tried using like randomized IDs, so that there would be a significant, like a super low chance that you would have the same ID when they were all joined together, so that you wouldn't have to basically make your own join geometry node. But it's okay. It's okay. I should probably call this join particles instead of join new particles, because that is an unnecessary word. And I also say with IDs, because just to imply what the node does at a glance. We can see that this node is still a little bit laggy. If I turn off the... Because in this case, I believe it lags simply because of the amount of vertices on screen. Edges, faces, you know, all those. If we go into the spreadsheet, we can see that we're dealing with around 100,000 of those, but we can see that that's working just fine. I am in 24 frames per second. Let's go up to 30, just so that we can see it a bit better. The grid in the background, I should probably have turned off because, yeah, now that's a lot clearer to see. We're at 13 minutes. Okay, we're doing good on time. All right. So, let's set the NURBS. We can see that's already lagging. And we can see that's because we're hitting close to 200,000, even though, let's look at the timings. Yeah, we can see that this part is the most expensive part of the entire system, which I wish it could have been fast, because look, that's real time. You know, it's still expensive because geometry nodes is just slow. But if we do that, we can see that that's the most expensive part of this entire process. And we can tone it down by a bit, but it's still... I wish it could be faster. Like, this part isn't too bad. It is... Let's see, that's 1.5. It's 2.2. Yeah, it's... I wish it could be faster. Again, if I could just use the hair system that Blender has by default, and if the radius actually worked, this would be a piece of cake. But unfortunately, we do not have the ability to do that. Just because, again, with geometry nodes, it still feels like it's in its infancy because we don't have access to the data. That's geometry node's biggest problem. It's hard to get data into it, and getting data out of it is, I would say, decent at this point. Again, the active camera node is a good example of that. We only have access to the position, the location, rotation, and scale. Geometry is completely useless when using this with the active camera input. And it's like, if you want any other data from the active camera, you just can't get it unless you use a setup with a driver, which drivers are very annoying to work with. So, yes. All this for a simple node that in other programs you would have by default. And I believe if you use the old particle system, I think there may be a way to get proper hair trails, but I'm not entirely sure. Like, you use the hair as a workaround for a curved trail, and it's iffy, but it might work. But again, we want everything in geometry nodes because that's the least broken it can be, looking at you, rigid body system, and cloth system, and all the other systems. Because, again, I need to explain this once more. In 2.8, the dependency graph changed. So with a lot of these nodes, well, not nodes, but with a lot of these setups, the dependencies are now a bit broken. If a mesh is deforming live over time, it won't update because of the dependency graph. So that's why they want everything to be in GeoNodes, because it's like that. But it's going to be like 5 years before we get stuff like this in geometry nodes natively. It's a little pessimistic of an outlook, but currently things are taking quite a bit of time. Alright, so I want to try the trail setup with more objects, with more scenarios, now that it's basically done. To put it, like that. I have another setup in here, which I forgot what it actually is. Where are you? I do not know much about it, but it is lagging. It's the same setup as the other one. Okay, so I'm just going to assume that that's a different spawner. That does not matter at this case. I can delete that. Eventually, this will be put into my particle system, the setup that I have up on Gumroad for free, once again. But it's still very much in its R&D stage. Like, this could be made a lot simpler if I just used the camera aligned version, but the crisscross pattern can be useful in some scenarios, so it is more, you know, a lot bigger of a setup. Like, if I did not want to use the crisscross version, I could just eliminate quite a few of the nodes, but it is unfortunately necessary. Alright, okay, other scenarios. Let's go into the shaders, because I have not talked about that just yet. Alright, so for the shader, this is the setup, which, let me just move this out of the way. So basically we have, you know, the usual. We have the gradients right here, one for along the curve, one for, you know, across the curve, and so on. We separate that from the attribute that I set, which is the trail UV. I'm sorry, what is wrong with you? That should not be occurring. Which means that I forgot to turn... Wait, what? Oh, no, the particles split. That's why. Alright, so if I were to turn off the particle splitting, we will see that all that is just consistent. Alright, which I think that's better for explaining if the particles do not split over time. Okay. So we have just the trail of the particle, you know, a gradient from the middle, and then I multiply that by the age so that the age goes down over time. I have a noise texture based off the UVs, even though these ones can go along with the curves like this, or they could stay completely still. So we should see, it is a little hard to see because of how skinny the trails are, but these don't appear like they are moving. I like to keep it at 0.5 so that it kind of feels like it's being dragged along just a little bit. But we multiply those two together, And then I use my logarithmic light fall off technique, which again, it's a little bit hacky, but we set the minimum to 0.999, logarithm to 0.999. We multiply that by the original gradient, then we multiply that by a multiplier of our choice in order to get a bright, crisp gradient. So as we can see, this is it after, again, it before, and then it after. And it looks pretty good. And then when we put that all together, that's pretty nice. For the color, I'm using that aspect of the trail UV again. I don't really need this part, but it's good for customization. I basically take this, here, let's show this without the desaturation. It looks like this, which there's a little bit too much green for my tastes. I wanted this to look like, I don't know, dispersion or iridescence in a way. We basically take the middle of the gradient, desaturate based off that to give it that kind of look, and then we send that into the color, and it looks just fine. With this part right here, it's if we wanted a random color per thing. This is so that I could re-randomize the color because, well, we need a snap because of float point precision errors. Then we white noise it, and then it's mostly fine. But we can see that with other colors, it can look really, 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 really cool. Let me turn on the particle splitting once again. And as we can see, that looks pretty gosh darn good, which I'm happy about. But yeah, now it's time to make other setups with this, because now, since it's pretty much done, it's time to actually play around with it. It's time to actually do some creativity after the very annoying math portion of it. Okay, so you've been staring at this for too long. Let's make it a little bit different. So let's go into the geometry node editor. I'll save this as another file eventually. Let's just turn off the geometry snapping portion of it. Let's just go and chop that entire portion out. Let's make it so that these particles go up by just a little bit. So here, if we take a look at it, let me hide the empty and just select this. The empty should have been in that part of the setup. But here we can see, oh, it's beautiful. Like, look at that. It's incredible. For the particle splitting, it's a node setup. I should expose some parameters, but I'm not too worried about it because I don't really plan on keeping it all too much. But as we can see, it looks pretty nice. Pretty cool, pretty clean. The brightness might be a little bit low, so let me go and bump that up to 200, just so that you can see a little bit better. Let's change it so that the split probability is a lot less. And let's also change the mix factor for the noise. Before, I had the noise rotate the velocity, but I found that that was a little bit weird because of, again, Euler's. As we can see here, it looks pretty good. I think it might be still a little bit too dark. So let's go and bump it up by a bit more. That's a bit better. Let's go into the shader editor and let's switch it to the nice purple hues. So let's go and put that into there. That's pretty nice. It's barely visible in a non-dark environment, so we could go and just bump that up by a bit. If we switch the logarithm to point, yeah, that's a bit better. Still a bit much in terms of the strength. Figuring out the nice crisp fall-offs is a little bit difficult to do. But anyway, let's go into here. I'll read the chat really quickly because I see I just got added. Disable the particle splitting. Like, the particle splitting, it looks cool, but I don't think I'll keep it for the most part. But yeah, it's alright. Okay. Are you planning to release your particle sim? Yeah, it is released at the moment. Just not the trails part because I'm still working on that. You're watching me work on it live. Hello, Caramel. Hello. Your workarounds for geonodes limitations are very creative and very well based on efficiency. Yes, the efficiency is good in any way you slice it. Having a more efficient setup is good, but the reason I'm doing it is more of a geometry nodes necessity because, again, geometry nodes is super duper slow compared to, you know, GPU particle systems or other particle systems, like even, you know, Blender's own particle system. If you want particle collisions, the performance is about 10 times better than the system that I made. And I don't know how to make my system any faster, especially with particle-to-particle collisions, because I don't know how to create my own KD tree or Octree tree for that kind of stuff. Maybe I'll figure it out one day. But at the moment, the system is in an okay state, and I just don't want to worry about it at the moment. I love when you say, oh, wait, what? It perfectly encapsulates that relatable moment when we all feel like doing this stuff. Yeah, quite often, because, again, I don't really come from a coding background, all too much, but I'm learning the logic with all of this, and I feel like with geometry nodes I have a good grasp of it at the moment, but sometimes it still very much surprises me. I can assure you, those moments are so fun. Hi, Cartesian Caramel. What do you think about Blueprint in Unreal Engine? It's good. I haven't used it too much because, again, with Blender, it's my main thing. I use geometry nodes way more than blueprints. But as far as I've seen, blueprints are good. I haven't really gone like, oh, how much is it to do this operation or that operation, but it seems alright. Do you have any advice to replicate the microbots from Big Hero 6? I've been wanting to do that for a while, but I still don't know particularly how they made that. I haven't looked at it in a while. The last time that I tried making it was probably in like 3.1 or 3.0. So I should take another look at it, but yeah, I don't know how they made it. I would assume that they just had like voice crack, paths for the particles to go over. And I don't know how they made the particles not collide with each other if they had a rigid body system, which again, we don't have access to in GeoNodes. I do want to look through the code for that though, because, well, I know for geometry nodes uses a little bit of the bullet system for convex hulls. That's one thing that I found while looking through the source code. And again, geometry nodes uses C++, the real-time compositor uses C++, or at least I'm not sure how much of the compositor uses C++, but it's part of it. And that's partly why the scene time node wasn't put into the shader editor, I'm assuming, because it's different languages, which is very, very annoying. But I can understand why. Even though I really wish we had the scene time node in the shader editor, because the drivers are a pain to work with, and in my experience, they are less than reliable. Let's see, let's switch this to be a little bit more like that. That's pretty cool. Oh, one thing that I haven't tried yet. Oh wait, we're not in the GeoNode editor. Yeah. Is Eevee Next fixed? As far as I've seen, no. It's still very much broken. Which, we're coming up on the 2-year anniversary of Eevee Next being delayed. It was supposed to come out in 3.2. Yep. When I don't need that scale node anymore. Yeah, I really don't need that, technically. I could just delete those. That was from when I was using the rotation there, but since it gets normalized in the output, it doesn't even matter. Let's see. No, I should be using the life attributes. Which I know it's not as memory efficient to store all those attributes as named attributes. It's a little bit slower. It would be better for me to just store the, what was it? To just derive the life from the age and the lifetime, which do need to be stored. But as far as I know, like Unreal Engine does the same thing with their Niagara system. Alright, yes. So with these particles, once they get close to the ends of their lives, they will just entirely switch to the noise orientation, which is pretty cool. Yeah. Oh, now the thing that I want to test is setting the trail radius by the trail age. So I need to change the profile to give it one extra bump in the resolution. So now we can get something like this, which it still needs a bit of work in order to look good, but this is one of the goals. Let's see. Yeah, what I need to do is make it so that, one, the trail is not really bound to... It doesn't follow along all too much, but I also need to make it so that this part is affected by the thing before it goes through the thing, if that makes any sense. So instead of that, we do something more along these lines, which we'll see how it works. It's kind of working. But we also need to set U back to 0.999 so that we can get that crisp fall off. Like, the goal of this is so that the noise does not look super weird like it currently does. Okay, which one was that? Here, yeah, let's set this to 0.1. There we go, that's a little bit more of what I was going for. I want kind of an ethereal wisps slash ghost feel to it. And then we can set the fade. How's the fade looking? Oh, right. I did set the bloom threshold to be extremely low, way lower than it should be. Now that looks a little bit off. But it's all right. Oh, and that should be 1, or maybe 1.1. There we go. Now we're seeing the fall off in all of its proper glow. There we go. Oh, I just messed up a few little things. Like, look at that. That looks pretty good. There we go. I do need to remember to save this. Okay. Oh, and also, one thing that I forgot is I have a new Be Right Back screen that I worked on yesterday. Just a random thing that I was working on. I was like, oh, let me just try to make a cool little graphic design thing. And I was like, oh, I'll change it to be a Be Right Back screen. Which, when I save this, I will throw that up. Actually, I'll do that right now. Also, we have 36 people here at the moment. Thank you all for stopping by. Let's see, image. Let's, actually, for the busy screen, I need to switch this to a different media source. Well, I'll do that in a second. Okay, I'm gonna save this project as Trail 3, 4.1. But yeah, maybe I'll have that for next stream, because I don't want to fish through all my renders, because I don't even think I named the file yet. Alright, but we have this now. It looks really freaking good. The only downsides are, as we can see here, the resolution of the... Actually, is this facing the camera still? Here, let's go and reset this to be... Let's make this a proper system. We set that to be 0, let me read the chat once again, because I know someone said something that I need to respond to. S.1. There we go. Let's go and take a look at the... Oh my gosh. That's pretty cool. And actually, performance with that many particles? That's not the worst. Oh, and if you're wondering what these lines are, they don't appear in the render. But that's when a trail gets to a life of pretty much 0. It has no parts to... It's only one particle, so it can't interpolate to another particle, so you just get the line edges, which again, don't appear in the actual render. Man, that's freaking cool. Alright, let's scale that to 0.25 once again. Where camera? Okay, so we want the empty. Let me go and clear the animation on that part. Like, people have been bringing up Unreal... people have brought up Unreal Engine a bit. Unreal Engine is clunky from my experience, from a UI standpoint coming from Blender, but it has its perks. One of them is, like, copying an entire location, rotation, or scale. With Control Rig, it has... Oh yeah, I think the Blender devs were thinking about this a little bit at once. But they would have like a matrix output, and then if you click a drop down, it would separate into location, rotation, scale, which was cool from a UI standpoint, not having to convert it with a node. But actually, with Blender, having to separate it with a node, I think is still okay. But having the drop down, well, it would be interesting. I think the devs were looking at that like maybe a year ago or something, but it just never got developed on. Which speaking of that, I hope that the function node does get developed, because that would be really, really, really useful for a lot of big node setups and copying code from Stack Overflow. Let's see. Ooh, yeah, that looks good. Yeah, it feels still like a slight bit off. A little bit more noise. Like, I don't know why it has that kind of look to it, but it kind of looks good. That's what I like about this kind of stuff, when you can work on something and then it actually does look good, when it's actually artistic in the output. Here we go. Like, I think we should have less particles and more trail. Splitting the particles, we don't need to do that. Let's just have the default amount, and then set the trail length to something like 50. I hope this doesn't lag, but I kind of foresee it lagging. It's alright. Like, look at that. That's really, really good. That's the goal with all of this, to make stuff that looks good and is convenient to use in a project. Which, if I'm being honest, this isn't too convenient just yet. It's not one node where you can just do everything you want at the moment. I should make a master node so that I could just say, hey, do this, you're good. Let's cross-product. Let's make it so that the particles spin afterwards. So in this case, no. Okay, so I'll need to mix between the two. I should normalize it then scale it afterwards, but with this, since I'm, just testing, it's not entirely needed. So let's just do a bit of that. This should make it so that it wow, I didn't expect it to, like, slow down that much. I could just use a vector rotate node, that would be simpler. Vector rotate. Let's set this to be the z-axis, so that it'll just keep rotating 5 degrees every frame. Might be a little bit too overzealous, but we should, maybe not enough? Interesting. Very, very interesting. But yeah, imagine like I don't know, like an orb or a chest where a ton of evil spirit, Ark of the Covenant style. And then that happens. Like, that's the goal, to make something that looks that good. Alright, any suggestions? Let's see, let me read the chat. Is capture attribute faster than store named attribute? From what I've seen, no. The only downside is that it will use more memory if it doesn't get used. So, let me explain. The store named attribute, it'll just keep the attribute it has in memory, which is good when you want to export it to the shader editor. That's why I use named attributes all the time, so that I can access them in the shader editor without having to plug in 500 outputs into here, and then name them all in here. Named attributes are the way to go. The Blender devs, technically used a named attribute with the curve to mesh UV node, or no, the deform curves on surface node, because there's an attribute that's like spline UV thing or whatever that is. That's not a default attribute that Blender has, and in the code they've referenced that one, even though in my personal opinion it should have been exposed as an output in case people want to use something a little bit different. Yeah. But they probably had a reason for making it that way, so I should not say that if I do not know for sure. Okay. Let me read the chat again. My 10-year-old son expressed a desire to learn Python, so we're learning it together. I'm amped up to finally be jumping back into programming. That's very cool. I've made some add-ons before, but I don't have that much Python experience. I probably should, because I would like to put the scene time node into the shader editor. Again, well, no, the shader editor probably uses... I forget what language it should use, but anyway. But no, it's a reference. So, wait, I don't know. But, yeah, I've been getting interested in creating stuff for Blender, modifying Blender, and then hopefully putting it into the main. Just because, like, with add-ons, they're good, and they can solve a lot of problems. But for someone who is learning Blender, or for consistency between the editors, I would like it to be in Blender by default. There are a lot of nodes for consistency and such, and some community members are working on it, like the integer and boolean in the shader editor. I think that one is being developed currently. But consistency between the editors they've been drifting apart, since geometry nodes is in C++. But it would be nice if they reconvened. Okay, I heard that you leaked/sent an invite leak to your Discord server in a recent stream. I couldn't be there, and I can't find a link online. Could you send a link? Yeah, I could put it in there. Just so that you are aware, I very rarely use the Discord server. I made it years ago, and it's just there if I want to do something sometime, but it is very much dead. But I will copy it and put it in the chat if you want to. Just be aware, it is very much dead. It's only there if I absolutely need it. Okay, next one. I'm imagining them following a path and then lighting it up along the way, showing where to go, and then stopping around an important artifact or something. Oh yeah, I can see that 100%. Yeah, let me actually let's use that cross product again to add in a force. So cross product well, no, I need to take the velocity cross product by, well, no. It's been a while since Ooh, that's fun. Look at that. Yeah, we need the velocity as the input, and then I can add it into the system. Oh, no, that's why it does that, because it rotates by 90 degrees instead of less. Ah. Then if we set it to be, okay, yep, right. Isn't it funny when you use cross products with your nodes and then you completely forget what it does in other contexts? Oh no, I need to take the position, then cross product it. Then that would create a force around it. But this will become, yeah, okay. There we go, but as we can see, it's a little bit too much, and it will become more powerful the further away it is from the center. So it is less than ideal, but we should see that it is... A common problem with this setup is that it just gets to be too dark for me to see. Something like that. It's pretty cool. I should normalize the position so that it stays rotating the same amount. That's pretty cool. See, that's what I wanted with all this. For cool trails that you can just play around with. But unfortunately, the copious amounts of math got in the way. That's why I want to put this in the system. Which, the Blender devs have mentioned that they're creating a platform to share assets easily, like an open source, non-monetized platform, which could be cool. But I don't know when that's coming out. Let's see. Yeah, named attributes to talk about that again. Named attributes just store more in the memory. As far as I know, they are exactly the same cost-wise. The capture attribute node was made, well, okay. It was made before, well, okay. It was in Blender before the named attribute got reintroduced. The named attribute node was in the alpha versions of 3.0, and then they removed it, which I was very, very saddened by. And then it took 2 updates for it to be put back in there because they found out, oh, we need this. Yeah. I forgot where that thought was going, and I don't feel like retrieving it. But yeah. It's pretty cool, pretty cool. I think solid colors look like... For some reason, I keep gravitating towards the purples. Purple is a very, very cool, magical color. And let me also scale up this. And then I can... There we go. Yeah, that's more like it. Making it so that the noise is kind of dragged along the system. Interesting. Another thing that I've been thinking about is making this radius here be affected by the noise instead, which I think could work quite well. Could. So let's give that a bit of a test. That looks cool. Oh, that looks so cool. I would imagine that this would be in pretty high demand. But again, this system needs infrastructure, which I'm not the happiest about. I really wish... Like, one idea that I had, instead of... One idea that I had was storing each trail state as a different named attribute, like position 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that would be on the particle, so that I wouldn't have to worry about the particle IDs. But then that kind of would mean that I would have to instance a curve and then put it where those positions are. And then when that particle gets deleted, all the other parts would get deleted as well, which isn't great. So I couldn't do that. If you make it green, you can make the timelines like Loki. In a way, yes. And I can make them split because I did make a node for that. I used to be very opposed to making node groups because it was like, oh wait, I need to... There we go. Interesting. Let's just go and make this much worse on my computer, just for fun. Like, another downside is that when these do split, the age does not get reset, which was intentional, but still a little bit annoying. Because since here we can see that, again, when a split happens, that just gets cut off. Which, again, is a little bit annoying. I could reset the age, but then it would mean that these particles, every time they would split, would keep going. They would keep existing all the time, which I don't want, because that would cause a little bit of a self-destruction to my computer. So, let's change this back to 0.1, or let's make this a more deliberate split. So every 25 frames, there will be a noticeable... Interesting. Let's make it so that there will be a guaranteed split every 25 frames. I think the noise is affecting it too much, so let's set that to be a dedicated number. And I keep forgetting that these are always aligned to the camera, thanks to the setup that I made. There we go. Needs a bit more. Like, since these are all aligned to the camera with the ribbon system, like, unfortunately we can't get the view transform, at least not that I know of at the moment. I would imagine that that would severely hurt dependency graph stuff. Especially if the camera is being affected by geometry nodes. But, anyway, actually... No, I could do that with the active camera node anyway, so who knows. It's cool. Cool. Let's change the shader. I don't really know where I'm going with this at the moment. I had ideas yesterday, but from fiddling around with this, my inspiration has kind of been all extinguished with, you know, what's a better way of extinguishing creativity than having to do a lot of math? Boilerplate math. That's what it feels like. Okay. Let me turn the trails down, because right now I believe they're 50 frames long. Well, before they were like 15. Let's turn that down. Okay. So here we can just see it's just a ton of little missiles, which is pretty cool. We change it to 15. Like, that feels like the ideal length. Let's see. There's a good chance that I will revert this anyway. And we're almost at an hour. So I think that's good enough. Reds look amazing. Purples always look amazing. For some reason, the blues don't feel quite... Oh, and by the way, I should mention that with these, I am using the AGX color space instead of Filmic. Because Filmic gets a little bit too saturated when you go to the super high values, which doesn't look the best. While with AGX, it handles it better, more naturally. Which sometimes you may not want that. But when you get to high values with Filmic, the colors all get compressed into magenta, cyan, and yellow, I believe. I forget the specifics. Do-do-do. I'm just having fun with this at the moment. Yep. Alright, maybe we should call the stream here, do a shorter one for today. When will you release the particle trail node? When it's ready. Like, it feels like it's almost ready, but it still feels iffy just because with all the other systems you would need the consistent IDs. If not, you need to switch that off, which becomes... Wait a minute. Wait, why is that so much less expensive? Ah. That is why. So, okay, yep, I knew that. If you don't interpolate the NURBS, it's a lot faster, of course. Profile resolution would make it even faster. But yeah. Alright. Yeah, I don't really know where to go with this beyond this right now, so I should stop playing the same animation over and over and over again. But we can try maybe... Oh, let's make it follow a curve. Someone mentioned that a long time ago. So let's go and give that a try. Unfortunate. Another workaround. So, unfortunately, if you want to access... You can't really sample nearest on a curve, I don't believe. Sample index. Let's see if we can. Do that and that. And I want to get the curve tangent and then feed that into the system. Let's see if this does work. Oh, does it? Wait. No, it does not still. Which I find really surprising that you have to convert it to a mesh beforehand. But, well, conversions, expensive, not fun, but they have to be done. To mesh, so we do this, which will extend, you know, make it slower, and then we need, I'm going to use a capture attribute because, you know, it's a short distance for this to go. No, that wants to go right there. So if we do this, let's put this all over here. Now this should work. It's not interpolated, it's just referencing the nearest one. And then I should make it be attracted to the mesh as well, which I could just use the geometry proximity node, and then feed that into the system. So if we do that, delete all that. Wow, this is becoming a big mess overnight. Ah, it's okay. I don't plan on saving it. Scale, add, and so on. All right. So let's do that. Let's set it to 0.1 for both of them. Ah. And I should probably make it so that that just influences the offset instead of making it speed up a ton, which means I won't really need to scale the inputs. I'll just need to mix between, follow the tangent or attract to the actual mesh. There we go. Are you good? Yeah, it looks like it's okay now, but it's not going. Why is it not going to the mesh? I'm confused. Oh, that's because I had that on faces. It needs to be edges. Isn't there a sample curve node? Yeah, but sampling the curve with positions, making it position based is annoying. Because here, with the sample curve node, there's no position input for it. Like, you could use the distance to, well, would that even, no, I don't think that would work. I forget if there's a way to make it position-based for the sample curve node, but... Technically, there is a way, but it would... No, a mesh conversion would be needed anyway. I think. Okay. So, let's make it so that this is attracted to the actual... Why is it so gosh darn slow? Oh, yep, that's why. Because that happens. There we go. Okay. Now it's attracted to the curve. But now I want it to mix a little bit between that so that it will rotate around it. Very nice. I do want the speed. Yeah, let me just set a speed. So... I don't know. It's getting normalized anyway, so that's fine. I'm just going to set the scale to be something of my choice. This is getting very messy very quickly, so let me just go and delete everything that's unnecessary just to make my brain a little happier with it. So delete that, that, and that. Okay, and delete that. Alright, there we go. So now we can see it is rotating around there, even though it's still a little bit... Let's see. The noise is affecting it as well, which looks pretty cool. But I think that's it. Alright, thank you all for watching. I'm going to call the stream here. Let me read the chat one more time. Did you use node setup in your... Do you see do you see nodes in your sleep? You're so good at this. That has never happened yet. And I don't think it will. Dreams really do not work well with computers. If you've ever tried to use a computer or a phone or anything like that in a dream, you'll see that it just doesn't really work right, which is how you can tell that you're in a dream and then start to, well, that's lucid dreaming, but that stuff's fun. But if those of you who do VR, well, doing VR stuff in a dream is very possible, and actually it works very well, which I'm surprised by. Because I've had dreams where I've been in like a VR game before, and it just works. Like, it's like you're in VR normally, except you can walk around, which is very odd. But it's interesting. Alright, that'll be... Oh, let me read that last thing in the chat. I wonder if creating your own form of nearest would be more efficient than a convert to mesh and then back to curve. Like the position of samples around the curve and then repeat it to compare them. I don't think any node that I could make would be faster than the nodes we have built in. Because I'm assuming, I haven't looked in the source code for this, but I'm assuming that this node uses the KD tree like the other nodes do. Like all of these, I assume, use a KD tree, which is an efficient form of searching for things that are close to each other. And as far as I know, I haven't found a way to recreate that with nodes. So, and that's the thing. With node setups, the goal of geometry nodes is that every modifier will just be a node. But I'm a little concerned about that because one, code is so much more memory, like it takes up so much less space than nodes. Because, you don't have to store a position for every single node, and then, all the values for the inputs and such. And also, there's so much inefficiency with nodes, like, oh, we need to convert to a mesh in order to sample the nearest, even though that shouldn't have to be done, because curves, you should be able to sample the points on a curve instead of the conversion. But there are so many little instances of that they'll just be slower off base than just coding it. They'll already be way less memory efficient due to the size of the nodes and then where they're placed, but also just because we don't have the operations that the code stuff has yet. I guess the closest thing we have, well, we do have the edge. Actually, no. Like, we have nodes, like the shortest path node uses, I forget what algorithm for it. It's like, it starts with a D. But it has that in here, but we don't have access to that algorithm as a node. We could probably make it ourselves, but we don't have access to all the efficient tech behind it. Like, the repeat zone is super slow compared to if you want to try to make your own, which I have tried. So using this is the best option. But where was I going with that? What I meant to say was, code, it will always be faster than nodes. Probably. And more efficient than nodes. So, if I try making my own sample index node, or find the nearest index node, like if I wanted to do particle self-collisions in such an efficient manner, I don't think I could ever make it as fast as the code version is, which I'm hoping we get that eventually, like the actual low-level stuff, but I don't really foresee that. I don't really see that happening. Soon, at least. We'll see in the future. Like, I think it will be a necessity when they try to remake every single modifier as a node. Like, quite a few of these are possible to make with nodes at the moment, just the UI will be crud because we don't have access to enum switches yet. Are they even in this branch at the moment? I don't think so. I can check. But things like these buttons you don't have access to, things like the invert for a vertex group isn't possible. But yeah, the little things like that, we just don't have access to. So node groups are just not good enough yet, and they won't be for quite a while. Quite a while. Well, that's pretty cool. Anyway, thank you all for watching. I'll see you all next time. Have a good one, and if you have suggestions for what I should make with the trails, or optimizations for the nodes, please let me know, because I would like this to be faster and better. Alright, see ya.